Hello and welcome to another episode of the Roundtable, last one of this year. And today we've got a special guest. We've got Asben, for now officially known, running Kami Strength. Congratulations.
Thank
And
you.
today we're going to be talking about warm-up room etiquette, the challenges we face as coaches who all share a similar space when we are warming up our athletes, right? I think we can kind of go over unspoken rules when we do work in such a tight-knit space where there's limited equipment, limited space, and how we could help each other run an efficient working space so that everyone is able to essentially warm up on fair game, right? No one's left behind. No one gets disadvantaged when going through a warm-up room. So I guess we could talk about today the different kinds of challenges you see when you go through local, state, national, and international level. Because I know for you, Sam, you recently competed at Malta. I guess warm-up room etiquette at local level is completely different to how things operate when you get to international level. Things kind of are just different, right? So let's open things up there. From your perspective,
Yep.
Sam, what are the differences you kind of see between all those different environments?
Oh man, I think the weekend that just passed with New South Wales Junior States definitely gives us like an example of an extremed end of what it can be like in terms of a tight-knit space, racks, so many lifters, equipment everywhere and anywhere, compared to what Malta was like with Worlds, where it was like, very uniformed, big open room. You had like a combo rack shared between like two, max three people. So yeah, very different ends of the spectrum. And then depending on kind of the environment that you're in that sense, can kind of change how you operate and how you can kind of work together as a team. I think with the weekend that just passed, the main thing that we found was obviously it was really, really busy, not much space at all, really. So I think as coaches, we all had to be conscious of how much space we were taking up amongst the lifters, because obviously the lifters are priority. So not being in their way too much. And then also on that note, really working well together to make sure, like you said just before, everyone has a chance to jump in a rack when they need. I think the biggest thing, like, with warm-up timings and making sure everyone's on the right pace is, you have people that are at the start of the flight and then you have people at the end of the flight. So, you take like people who need to do the bar first, could be 10 minutes apart. So I think, in situations like at a local level, allowing people to jump in and helping anyone and everyone to jump in when they need to, even if that means taking 3-4 reds off and getting someone to do the barbell as they need, for example. Compared to, when you're at like the higher level and there's like a bigger warm-up room or more racks or more equipment available, where you can kind of run it in your own kind of timings and spacings, and it's not as stressful in that sense.
Yeah. And I guess the reason why we have Ben on this podcast today is he was a really prime example of someone who is just a workhorse and pretty much was able to help assist every single lifter, no matter what team they were in, and get everyone on board to be able to hit their openers on time, right? So for you, Ben, I guess, what were some things you've picked up recently? Because before our podcast, we were talking about like how in such a short amount of time, you were able to pick up all these little things that can kind of help a warm-up room run successfully. Like, so I guess opening up to you, what are some things that you feel like you've picked up recently that you think are like big rocks in terms of running a good warm-up room?
I definitely think communication is like got to be top tier. Like we have to understand who's doing what on what lift specifically. Deadlifts become the easier kind of movement, just because everyone kind of knows unspoken rules of like 70, 120 and whatnot. But when we look at like combo racks and the heights for bench and for squats, as well as the weights on the bar itself, we have to kind of communicate as coaches, especially on what's going up next, who's going up, when their flight number is. So being able to be on top of your game of when your athlete is lifting is super important. It made my job easier, helping out not having my own athlete, but just helping out, is understanding what the lifting order was, each coach understanding how many minutes they're out, as well as how many more warm-ups they had, and communicating that through. I think being generous and polite and being able to remember your please and thank yous really helped as well. But yeah, I think those are the core things that help create good flow when working in with one another in regards to the warm-ups.
Yeah, because I remember a specific point in time where we were having a session and it was like bench press, and there were like 5, 6, 7, 8 lifters on one bench press, right? And we were operating at a speed where everyone's able to get through everything and didn't feel like anyone like lost a lift or anything like that, right? And it was very heavily focused on communication between yourself, like having someone out there to call out like who needs what next, being able to, I guess, I think actually I'm kind of going off on another thought, like where all the coaches end up becoming glorified spotters and loaders in that back room, and you have to operate faster than what's happening out on the platform, right? That's kind of how I conceptualize things. Yeah, but the limitation is you don't have that scoreboard to kind of go, who's next?
Yeah, I definitely think that working in that warm-up room, like I think my first time helping out a powerlifting comp and spot loading, I had no idea what was going on, but I had like Zaid yelling out how many plates, what numbers, what rack height helped quite a lot as well. And I've noticed you being able to memorize in which order things come out, and the only thing I could do is at least remember the rack heights for each lifter, and which kind of helped quite a lot. And so as the lifter is going up for his next warm-up and you're calling out what weight there was on, the most that I could do was at least remember what rack height are we working towards and putting on, and being able to vocalize and communicate that helped quite a lot. A lot of people don't do that, and a lot of people just expect that, oh, the athlete's going next, and it's just like, what are they going to do? Like standing around doesn't help.
Yeah, I think sorry, you go, Sam.
I was going to say there was one point that Ben pointed out in terms of like knowing the lifting order, which I think is really important, especially when it comes down to like, 5 minutes before the flight starts or whatever it is, like allowing the lifters to do their last warm-ups in the order that they're going to be taking their first attempts, so everyone kind of gets equal rest. So I think that's where it's like really important that, if you're working with a coach from another team or just a random lifter, that you know where they are in the flight as well as your own lifters, and you can let them go before you if it's needed or if they want that same amount of rest, right? So again, it comes back to like being like selfless and allowing other lifters to jump in when they need to make sure that they're having ample rest before their opening attempts.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like like that, I think that last warm-up is the one that's really key, right? I think when things do get so packed, you kind of do need to compromise at some points, and it does suck in the moment, but you would much rather compromise like your first or second warm-up on the bar and compress those two rather than forcing yourself to hit your last warm-up 1 minute out from your opener and then go out to hit it, right? Like that's just a disaster that's waiting to happen, I guess.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, it's kind of like comp day and like out the back, it's like this really fine line between like being selfless but also being selfish and like having to make sacrifices at time, like both as athlete and coach. Like Sam just said, like you're obviously wanting to absolutely nail the times for your own athletes, and then there's going to be other coaches, athletes who are working in with you, which as long as, like Ben said, like communication is top tier and everyone's clear on what's happening, or because I know Ben was obviously helping me with Wendy when we were handling her on the Friday, so it's like he also had her warm-up attempts, he knew what she was doing. So I think it's also just like everyone working into their strengths as well, so that as a team, it's like if you're not strong on either doing the calculations to know what the timing is, like letting somebody else in the team do that. I know for like, I think all of us collectively, like Danny's a really big part of the team who does that. Like he's always on with the numbers. He knows the times, like he's doing the math straight away, like squats are finishing and he's already got bench and he's like, okay, this is when bench is starting. This is when everyone needs to start warming up. And I think it just flows really nicely. And I think that's just like a big thing for like out the back in any comp day. It's like, yes, we can be selfish, but we also need to be selfless at the same time and make sure everyone's like getting their own fair share and having a really good experience too.
Yeah. And I think that kind of plays into like why I guess us as perf coaches do well as a team, because there's so many hands on deck, right? But I guess the whole reason for this conversation is like, because it's not just perf athletes back there, but like everyone else, right? And with such a limited amount of space, learning how to communicate with other teams as well. And I guess like dissolving those boundaries of like, I'm here for just my athletes, and rather it's like I'm here to help everyone. I think that's what makes a warm-up room run really successfully. Have
I
you
feel
guys
also
sorry,
sorry.
you go, Ben.
Yeah, I feel like the unique perspective that I had here now is on the Saturday, I didn't have any athletes of my own, and I just came as someone was floating around and helping out. And it makes a really big difference to have additional hands on board when it's not your own athlete and kind of getting a hand for it. And it helps because I come in pretty unbiased. Like I just understand, okay, this is the projected start time of the flight, and how many ever warm-ups that you need, you let me know, and then I can calculate who can go in which order. I think that's where the other confusing part is that a lot of coaches don't communicate how many warm-ups they have left. And it's just like, okay, if you go in ascending order in regards to warm-ups, and your athlete has 8 warm-ups, for example, it gets a little bit tricky because you're stuck doing, your weights again, or have to strip the bar down and whatnot. So yeah, communicating is key. I think another part was we kept sharing start times and updating start times, which was really, really helpful. It's not something that you need to kind of hold to yourself, and it makes everything run a lot smoother if everyone can just unify and just understand that it's a universal thing. It's a start time. And everyone
Yeah,
can kind of
we
get
don't
on
need to
board with
hide
it, right?
it.
Yeah, exactly. And I was just like, what? I was just asking the start time. All right, I'll get calculated myself.
Yeah, that was like Saturday, because Saturday was like a shit show, like with the end of the first session and then the start of the second, because it was like just so out of time. And I remember I saw you, Ben, and I was so frazzled because like we were all taken up with other athletes in the first sort of session, and then I was trying to get other guys warmed up for the start, and I like ran up to you and I was like, can you help out? And you were like, I'm doing other guys, but like, yeah, I'll try my best. And it's like, I think just having your presence there, or somebody like you just said, where like, even if you don't have your own athletes, like just helping out and being that person that somebody can potentially come to in the moment to just say, hey, I've got this person, can you get them to do like their first X amount of warm-ups, and then I'll be straight out the back with you, I think makes, and just like eases the stress of all of that,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I think Shania covered that really well, where you were able to pretty much take on all my athletes in that transition period, right? And it goes to show openly communicating like what needs to be done between teams, within teams, is really key to getting everything running smoothly. I guess slowly to close things out. Sorry, Sam, did you have anything?
I was going to say real quick with the start time thing. Obviously this podcast is about etiquette and kind of good communication and manners and all that kind of stuff. But I guess a key for terms of like warm-up room and warm-up timing is to always be on board and looking at what the platform's doing. Because obviously you can have the perfect plan in terms of, it's 11 lifters, 33 minutes. We're going to start at 10:33 in 30 seconds. But like so much changes on that platform within a flight in terms of it goes quicker, it goes slower. There could be like a 5, 6, 7 minute delay. So like, yeah, when you're in the warm-up room, I guess, yeah, having someone who's kind of championing the start time, you know what I'm trying to say. That's like taking charge of the start time and can always look to delay it or change it for everyone is key, because it's just going to make sure that everyone's pacing at the right time.
Yeah. And I guess what I was going to get at was like closing things out, and we could talk about the ideal situation, right? Where like, if everyone works together, things are going to be sweet. But we could kind of unpack a little bit where sometimes that doesn't happen, and there's this breakdown, which does make warming up a little bit more difficult. I guess we could go from your struggles or challenges when things aren't running well, and why you might think that's happening, right? I guess off the top of my head, I'm thinking like, if you're midway through everyone's warm-ups and then someone jumps in randomly and goes, hey, can I can I like do this weight, right? And I guess for one person it's not an issue, but if it's like a whole group of 3, 4, 5 people who then jump in and not communicating earlier before, like even while the bar's sitting there and like assigning who's going to be where or who's doing what, I think that lack of communication is where things can start to break down, and it like just creates chaos. Right.
I think an example of that would be probably Effectus just recently in Queensland, where like I guess because we were handling kind of everyone as a group, and it was really difficult with where the platform was and like our screen that was being updated. There wasn't much communication in terms of like when we needed our guys to start warming up, and then all of a sudden we had like Steve, Yuki, can't remember who else. There was like a bunch of other lifters who like needed to warm up, and they needed to warm up quick. Like it was like getting too close to the flight time, and then we had to like just jump them all in really, really quickly, which is obviously going to affect all those other athletes that are in the warm-up room as well. Yeah, that was pretty chaotic thinking back at it.
Yeah. I think the other one too, from like potentially my perspective, is like I think on the weekend too, when things flow really well, it's when I feel like there's sort of like groups of people just sort of stay together, and then they all warm up together for like every lift. So you kind of have like your team that you work with. And I think one of the things I struggle with the most is either when people sort of float around at different bars. So you can't really like get a flow. Like they sort of come in and they either see like, you know, an empty bar, they see 70, or then they see 120. They're like, oh, I need that. I'll just jump in and hit it. Versus like, I think when it did flow really well, especially I feel like on Saturday and Sunday, specifically on the weekend, you know, all the coaches and all the athletes sort of had the people that we were all sort of collectively warming up with. And it was sort of just this nice flow across every session, sort of every flight, every day, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get that. Just a comment back on the weekend as well. I think there was other small things as well as far as etiquette goes, where like small things where if there's a bar with like 200 kilos on it and no one's around, don't just start unloading the barbell just because the flight started. I know there was this happened to me probably 3 times, I think, with Jonas from Omni, Madeira. I shouldn't know how to pronounce his last name, but the 59 strong lifter, where I would be having someone take a warm-up, maybe 2 or 3 lifters into the flight, just because there was like 13, 14 people in the flight and I didn't want to be resting that long. So he comes over and sees a bar that's loaded. People are already lifting. There's been 2 or 3 attempts already taken. And it was really nice to see that he sort of looked around, saw me near the rack and was like, hey, like, do you know if anyone's still using this? Can I take it? And I was like, oh, I actually have one more warm-up left. I'm taking it in 2 minutes. As soon as I've done that, you can take it. So it was really nice for him to actually consider the fact that someone might still be using the bar instead of just immediately stripping the weight off. So I think that's another big thing with etiquette as well, is instead of just thinking like, okay, I need to strip this bar and get it down, is thinking, okay, who else is using it? You know, there could still be people warming up on this. I'm not just going to start stripping it because, you know, that could throw things off. So that was really nice that, you know, Jonas had the etiquette and the awareness to think about the fact that someone could still be using the barbell.
Yeah. Similar vein, I'm thinking like chalking backs, baby powdering. If, you know, a whole crew's coming out and you're already out there doing it, you might as well do it for everyone as well. Because it's likely like you've got your own coach waiting for you to come back whilst they're still warming up other people. So if one person's out there, they could get that job done for multiple people at once.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, you slip a little bit of talc on their hands, you know what I'm saying? No,
yeah, athletes cannot be trusted. They need someone to babysit them.
Yeah.
No, I was gonna say, just with like stripping bars, just really quick. At the end of the day, fucking help pack up, because it can be a mess, and sometimes, or quite often, the gym owner or the comp manager is left to kind of clean up. So normally it's deadlifts, normally there's heavy bars on the ground and it's a shit show to help clean up, but just quickly jump in, put some plates away and make the job easier for whoever's running the competition.
Yeah, man. And I guess it was a bit sad to see like the gym being left in such a sad state. So I mean, like general housekeeping rules, I guess, like just throw your rubbish in the bin. Like it's really basic, right? But like if you help keep the gym clean, the gym owners don't have to end up having a shit show at the end of the day. Because like fortunately we get to use their space. So I guess little things like that just go a really long way.
I think one of the weirdest things that I do with my athletes, and they're only sub-juniors, but it's more of like a life thing, is I used to go to the gym and starting out powerlifting, you've got your squat shoes, this shoe, that shoe, this sleeve, this wrap, and it's all over the place and you're just throwing all over. And you take up so much space around your combo rack and around everything. And it's become a habit for me to only have what I need out and have everything back in. Given the space that we had over the weekend and the amount of bags there were on the floor, it became a really big hazard. I think I saw with my own eyes, like 3 or 4 drinks being knocked over, not being cleaned properly, and then like food bags everywhere. And it was just not much space to kind of work around. And for my athletes, it's just like, hey, this is a practice that I got you to get into. Keep your bag very tidy, very, stacked, very, on the go. If you need to move, you can just move one, pick up one thing. And it helped quite a lot because there wasn't much space to work with. They all had everything crammed into one small corner with everything stuck on top of another. And it didn't take up space, but you could just see how much space where that vending machine was insane. There was no space whatsoever. It was just bags. And then I think a few athletes have tripped over those as well. And I was just like, damn, that must suck if you got injured. I think it's very important to stay very
and own experience.
Yeah.
Tripping up is not fun, man.
No.
One of my favorite things ever is when Ben's coaching his little fellas that they finish their third deadlifts and they start like going crazy, and they're like these young kids that are super happy to hit these thirds and pull PRs, whatever. And they start running off the platform, and immediately Ben's like, turn around right now and go shake the ref's hands.
Yeah.
Like, don't celebrate, go shake the hands, show some respect. And then they come off afterwards and you're like, yeah, let's go. Like that's my favorite thing ever. It's like, teaching him young and keeping him in line and shit. It's so good.
I mean, that's where it starts, right? The younger they're very uneducated. They don't know etiquette, and etiquette comes from a lot of practice and a lot of experience. And if they're starting this young now, we have to enforce what we believe is how we feel a comp should be run, or how they should prepare themselves and perform in the back room, and how they present themselves on the platform itself. We got to really guide them in that way. And I mean, that's what this podcast is about, sharing those experiences. And then those that are watching can kind of at least guide their sub-juniors or be inspired by and kind of help out as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess like the more we share it, it's like, I guess the more the value gets shared around. It's like, oh, there's a reason why we're actually practicing good etiquette. So then, a comp can run more successfully and it's not a shit show, or like it's less likely for something like that to happen. But yeah, I think that'll tie things off really well. Last podcast of the year. Ben, feel free to shout out your Instagram handle. I know you just started up Kami Strength, so feel free to promote that.
Yeah, it's been a long time, and I mean, it was quite hard because I don't know. I think every coach would feel very similar. Is that you don't know enough, and your service isn't going to be top tier enough to kind of produce something, but I think a lot of coaches out there, and a really good friend of mine, I would consider a good mentor. He's just like, dude, like you either do it now or later, and it doesn't matter, same effect. And so Kami Strength is my coaching service, and I hope to grow that into something big.
Yeah, for sure, man.
I've no doubt. Brother.
I did last night, actually. Saw it pop up and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna follow.
Thanks, Sam.
All right. Well, thanks guys for listening to another episode of the Roundtable. Hopefully you guys get to pick up a little bit more about etiquette, and yeah, we'll see you all in the next year. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Cheers, Danny.
Peace out.